What was for you the best part of the pandemic? Work from home has been legitimized in an unprecedented way. I always figured it would be, but I expected it to be another 20 years. COVID forced it and was definitely a silver lining. I love it. Love it. I'm supposed to start going back in 1 to 2 days a week, but I've been stalling. I do not want to go back. Ever. There's no point. I can do it from home. Company policy though. Why? Reasons. Big OL building they don't want empty, basically. And middle managers who don't like that they lost control. Right? I work in IT for local government. Out of 16 people, only 4 are on the help desk. We all knew that we were sitting in offices 40 hours a week to do 10 to 20 hours of work, maybe 30 on a busy week with lots of broken stuff. Pandemic hit and we all went work from home with one rotating help desk on site. I have been to the office maybe 20 times since March of 2020, network admin, so I have to do physical installs occasionally. All the rest of the county is back at the office. No one except our boss and the county judge even know that we still work from home. Everything still gets done. Not in the UK. One of the ministers, who is also known as Jack the Kipper, has been leaving notes on empty desks asking civil servants working from home why they're not at their desk. My wife is also being forced back into the office even though she's been working from home without any problems whatsoever. Maybe time to go job hunting? I was forced back into the office September 2021. It took me nearly a year to find the right position with the right company, but I'm starting a new role in 3 weeks in a field I've wanted to get into for years. And I'll be WFH 3 days a week. I had 2 friends that I hung out with almost every night. They were just as isolated as I was during the day, so we weren't too worried about passing anything. None of us got sick. Spent the nights drinking, having bonfires and talking. Good times. Some of the best. Yeah, I had a COVID gang. Great times. It was like being a kid again in some ways. I hadn't had a regular hangout going on since college. It's all over now for various reasons, but it was good while it lasted. It was like the good parts of high school. You didn't have shit to do, so you just hung out at each other's houses and did whatever or nothing at all. Ironically, not getting sick. I haven't had a cold or anything in years. Flu numbers were way down, too, even though there were less vaccinated. Due to my provinces, Ontario, Canada, we had some of the strictest lockdowns in the world, restrictions and mask mandates. My mom made masks at the beginning, to CDC guidelines, before Omicron, and sold them for $5 minus 12 each depending on fabric. She had all kinds, but NFL and NHL prints were most expensive, and a local store was ordering 30 a day. She made and sold over 2,000 masks. She could make 50 in a day. I got sick once a year prior to the pandemic. It was like a cold that ended with me losing my voice. For days. Around the same time every year too. Pandemic hit and I didn't get sick in that way since. Right. I usually get a cold a couple of times a year. I have kids. During COVID, since everyone were wearing masks, I didn't get sick, except for catching COVID. So I actually work in an and was swimming in COVID for a while. This was especially concerning in the pre-vaccination days. I'm one of those people who catches every respiratory bug out there and usually have a couple of bad colds, bronchitis every year that make me really miserable for a few weeks. From spring of 2020 until May of 2022 I didn't get sick once. I got COVID in May of 2022 when there was an outbreak at my kid's school and we figure she brought us home. That was the first time I had been sick since the start of the pandemic. It's almost like masking works. In all seriousness, I'll probably continue to mask during flu season in the future. It's a really interesting side effect after this pandemic. In Western countries, wearing a mask pre-pandemic was unheard of. You were weird doing that and stood out. But now I'll wear a mask to be safe, but sometimes I don't want to be recognized at the local event, so I'll wear a mask. I realized when the Mega Millions got really big earlier that it's a lot easier to hide who you are now if you need to have your picture taken. No need for fancy Halloween costumes or anything. Just wear a surgical mask and maybe a hat, and nobody will recognize you. Did you read my mind? That's how I'm winning the lottery. Face mask. Old trucker hat. Some old people clothes from Goodwill. Maybe a wig. My name will be public, but I won't look different enough that people don't recognize me and just think it's someone with the same name as me. My girlfriend and I decided to quarantine together even though we had only been dating for 6 months and, honestly, I didn't know if it would last. Better to not be alone, though. I lost my job, she was a PhD student, we were strapped for cash, but we spent every evening cooking incredible food that was as delicious as it was calming to cook. She is Iranian and I learned how unique Persian food was. She learned from her grandmother starting when she was 5 years old. I had a crazy idea, let's sell it. We started advertising on Nextdoor, put together a menu with one entree for every day of the week with sides and starters. We started working at 10 a.m. I was the sous chef and customer relations while she studied. So I would be chopping onions and garlic, searing eggplant, marinating lamb and talking and texting with customers. I had all of the takeout containers prepped for every customer by 4 and then she would do her magic. Pickup was at 6 outside of our apartment and then I did deliveries afterwards. We became so popular that we were pushing out 20 to 40 meals per day. It kept us afloat financially. So for me, the best part of the pandemic, we worked together like a well-oiled machine, had fun, solved problems, and were a comfort during the very scary times. And jumped in bed whenever we had a free moment. We got married a year later, and I have no idea if we would have without the pandemic. I moved in with a girl I had just started dating in January and we had fallen madly in love with each other. It was literally the best time ever for about 6 months. My job was abnormally stress-free at the time and she was graduating school. We basically both had the summer off and just hung out together, walked to the park, had way too many wine nights, Zoom parties, lol, and watched a lot of amazing content. For a few months we just watched mob-related things, ahaha. It was amazing and I miss that part of my life quite often, seeing as the relationship didn't last even when we tried a second time. I'll always look back on the pandemic and have that weirdly blissful few months where the world was ending but ours together was just beginning. I still love and miss her. I will never forget our time together and often wonder what if few little things were different and we were still together. I think about reaching out to her almost daily still after a year of us being apart. Not even to get back with her but just cause I genuinely want the best for her and wonder how she is doing often. Spending time with aging pets. I had to put down a cat in the last few months. He got to lay on my keyboard and purr all day. I also have an old dog who is nearing the end and I'm really happy I had those months at home with her. I also lost one of my cats last year. I'm so thankful I had a full year of being home with her and getting all the cuddles. I miss her every day, but knowing I was present all the time for her in her last year does bring me some peace. I was the complete opposite of you and op. 4 months into the pandemic, I went to the shelter and adopted a 6-month-old Siberian furball because I was so lonely and depressed from the constant isolation. Just coming across this question made me grimace because the solitude of the pandemic really got to me, but he was probably the only good thing to come from it. I'm really glad he helped you through it. Nothing better than the love of a pet. I did both, lost my senior, 2 months later got a puppy. I never imagined getting a pandemic puppy, but it was too lonely without my old girl. Same, friend. Much love your way and to all the rest of the animal lovers here. Prior to the pandemic, I traveled every week for work. For 6 years, I only saw my wife and kids on the weekends. And even then, I didn't get to see my wife much since she worked most weekends. Since the pandemic, I haven't had to travel at all, and have a new, much better relationship with my wife and kids. Opposite for me. Spending 24 hours a day with my wife and the kids put a huge strain on our relationship, along with both of us drinking more than we should have, only after the kids were in bed. On one hand it led to a terrible divorce, and on the other hand, we are both much happier now. You either realize you don't spend enough time together or realize you are using work to avoid the realization that you're incompatible. People suddenly stopped expecting me to go be social. I got to spend months on end without having to decline a single invitation. It was so nice. Oh hell yes. There was a satire article on the Beaverton, Canada's The Onion, about how lockdown was as close to retirement as millennials are going to get. Too real. Truth. My father had retired a few years previous and I ribbed him several times that I earned this little retirement. He took exception to that sentiment. I'm guessing you weren't invited to the many Zoom party, quiz, catch-up sessions. For a time, I started to realize I was just drunk alone in my flat after those hour-plus long calls. First few weeks when everyone was actually following the rules and enjoying their time inside, it really was a unique experience. It was so surreal going to the grocery store and seeing so many empty shelves for items and food I never would have seen a shortage of. It was wholesome embracing Zoom to catch pee with friends and family and all the celebrities getting together to do commentaries on beloved movies. Tiger King. The start of the pandemic and the Pokemon Go launch may be the closest moments we've been to world peace. Lol, the era of the pandemic when everyone was making focaccia bread, sipping on a Dalgona coffee and watching the first season of Tiger King to later laugh about it over Zoom. My baby used to spend 50+ hours in daycare and got sick all the time, and then she got to stay home instead, which was a life-changing difference. Then I got to spend my second pregnancy teleworking instead of going to the office every day, which was the second perk. Besides the gas prices dropping down under $2 per gallon, the fact that people had to respect the 6 feet of space in lines. There's nothing that annoys me more in a store than when people pull their cart up 2 inches from my back in the checkout line. Tanker driver here, no traffic. Driving through Chicago without touching my brakes once was unbelievable. The police and scales, if they were open, leaving us alone to do our jobs. I want to give a huge shout out to all the truck stop workers that showed up so we could help keep the country running. People tipped me insane as a pizza delivery driver. Averaged $150 cash a night in 2020.
Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.